Hey, Jim.
Hey, dude.
Glad we get back together again and do this. Okay, so today, um, one of the things that I find most fascinating about your perspective on the world is when it comes to money and wealth and like how you see those things, especially obviously as it relates to the opposite side of that, which I find you talking way more about, which is poverty and the downcast and those who are poor. And I'm sure you'll maybe relate that to poor in spirit, not just poor in material possessions. But one of the things I was curious to get your viewpoints on in particular today was more of the material side and how you see poverty and wealth and money and all of that within the kind of Christian framework, because I think you have a pretty interesting view on that topic. So I'm curious if we can maybe just start the discussion on like how you define some of those things. Like, how do you see the juxtaposition between wealth and poverty, or how would you maybe define those two concepts and ideas?
Okay. So I think I hear you saying that we want to talk about the material definitions of those things. Is that right?
Yeah.
We might touch on spiritual things, but it's maybe important to at least delineate that we can um, we can talk about poverty and use the word poverty to mean um, lacking some actual material thing, and then
Hmm.
we can also talk about poverty as in a spiritual sense. You can be spiritually poor,
Poor, right?
lacking um, spiritual insight or maybe even virtue or something like
Right.
that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like we want to talk about the material side of it.
Yeah, and because for me, where this all kind of came out of was like we get into a lot of these discussions about like capitalism or socialism or social structures of government or of the government of people and the wealth of a nation or the taxes, and we get into those kind of conversations. And so I think we'll get to those kind of maybe more broader, bigger topics. But I thought I want to focus in on just really quickly like how do you see it. But I think because we're Christians trying to live this life out, I think we would be remiss if we just spent the whole time talking about capitalism and socialism and different kinds of structure and government. So I want to focus in on those ideas still because I think you have some fascinating viewpoints, but I do want to bring in the spiritual element to it
Okay.
and how you see it.
Okay. So there is that delineation, but I'll start with the material stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Poverty, uh, I think mostly when we're talking about it, when we're talking about material poverty, generally what we're talking about is people who are lacking in necessary material possessions,
Right.
right? And I say necessary, I mean in terms of like to live,
Yeah.
right? Like if you don't have shelter and you can't afford it or obtain it, you're
Mm-hmm.
probably poor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, but if you were not able to obtain shelter, but had like 15 Bentleys, like you're still kind of poor
Yeah.
because you don't need Bentley. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, obviously, that's ridiculous. You could sell your Bentleys and get yourself some shelter.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
well, I mean, there's this concept of like house poor is the term I've heard before, where like, or just in general, where you might be making $1 million a year, but for whatever reason, you've decided that your living standards are $999,000
mm-hmm,
a year, and
mm-hmm.
so you could be poor in that sense, but because maybe you can't get out of your debt or have no actual freedom. So I can see what you're trying to say with that concept, but yeah,
I'm trying to get at the idea of poverty and necessity.
right, right,
Um, uh, and then you might very quickly dive into. I can even feel myself thinking, be like, well, what's really necessary? You
hmm,
know,
yeah,
I can even think about myself like I have more than what is strictly necessary,
right.
right? I bet if
Necessary for life.
for life, I
Uh-huh.
live far above that poverty
Yeah,
line.
sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Not even taking into account what this country considers to be its poverty line, or even things like the United Nations considers to
Right.
be the poverty line
Yeah,
or
it feels
whatever.
kind of subjective too, based on where you live.
And you'll find lots of people who maybe have more material possessions or wealth than I do that feel a level of poverty because they think that there is some higher amount of
Totally.
material wealth to gain,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't think that to completely say it. I don't want to say it is subjective. I want to say that yes, we experience that term subjectively,
Mm-hmm.
but if when I'm talking about poverty, I'm talking about necessities for life.
Got it. So then,
Necessities for
so
life.
so then, so then, is the group of people who are truly poor then very, very small relative to how maybe we would generally define poverty? Because using that definition, I would say there's probably very few, very, very few people in America that are poor using that definition, meaning they don't have the necessities for life. I guess it also depends on how you define necessity. I think you were going to go there.
It goes there pretty quickly,
Yeah,
doesn't it? Right.
right.
And you can just by way of example, I can hear conversations I've had about with maybe somebody who is homeless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you think, well, should I give them a $20 bill? They have a smartphone. They could
Mm,
sell that smartphone
mm-hmm.
and
Sure.
get $20.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
absolutely.
And so there's always this kind of like, uh, it's almost like we're counting the coins of
Sure.
ourselves, of others, you know.
Right.
Um, and so I think what I mean is not just to stay alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you could eat top ramen,
Beans and rice.
yeah,
Yeah.
and um, and live. But I think what we're talking about is getting toward the kind of like daily bread, like
Mm-hmm.
shelter,
Yeah.
you know, necessities for life, but
Right.
maybe not having diamond collections. You know, like
Sure.
there's somewhere in between there
Yeah.
that is um, worth thinking about. And maybe I also want to color this thing about material possessions, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but um, like there's kinds of poverty that require people to subjugate themselves to things that they might otherwise not do so.
Okay.
And for example, it might be that a woman finds herself needing to sell her body because it is how
Mm.
she can sustain herself.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a level of subjugation to me that if that person maybe didn't want to do that, but
Mm-hmm.
felt it necessary because of a social situation or a
Need.
economic need or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, that I would put into the category of poverty. Does
Mm.
that make sense?
Yes. Because the material pressure in her life is pushing her into a place, either in action or in work or in whatever, pushes her into a situation in which she's having to do something that she would not normally otherwise do,
Yes.
or anybody
Right.
would
By way
otherwise.
of example, and there are plenty of examples
See, that's
like that.
that's an interesting framework, because you could put you could put work in there. You use the example of prostitution in this example, but the necessity, the financial necessity of the situation that pushes that person into a place of subjugation, which you could define as the modern work experience, having to work at McDonald's because bills are necessary, or
Mm-hmm.
rent is necessary, or
Mm-hmm.
food is necessary,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't have those things without material possessions, which is interesting. I don't know if you would go that far necessarily to say that, but I'm curious. Take me. So we kind of landed somewhere around what your idea of poverty is.
Yeah.
How do you actually practically see that? Who do you see as poor versus, you might not say, okay, well, you might not be doing well, sir, in situation A, but situation B, that's definitely,
Mm-hmm.
that's poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm going to help the poor in this example, I'm going to go to person B before I might consider person A. How does that work out for you?
I'm glad you said help the poor. It might seem obvious because we're Christian guys. We're sitting at a church right now
Mm-hmm.
talking about this, talking about our faith in relation to poverty. But yeah, it's like a mandate over and over in the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, the
Mm-hmm.
Christian New Testament. Um, supposed to help the poor,
Right.
right? So that's not even a question for either of us.
Uh-huh.
We should help the poor. But the
Right.
next question is, who are they,
Totally.
right? So there's some obvious examples, right? The people who are living on the streets
Mm-hmm.
are poor.
Right.
That's obvious. It's even usually visually you're able to figure it out.
Absolutely.
You know, the people in prison are
Mhm.
poor.
Okay.
You know, maybe not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They might
Right.
have material possessions on the outside, but due to their circumstances, most of their circumstances, prison is a complex system.
Yeah.
But I would say in general,
Okay.
imprisoned people, incarcerated folks, especially in the United States,
Not wealthy.
not wealthy,
Yeah.
right? And we could talk about all sorts of things that we would have to Google, but like the amount of people who are in what the nation considers to be poverty, who are in prison, is
High.
the vast majority.
Yeah.
Right. So they were in poverty, and as a result of choices and circumstances,
Right.
are in prison.
Yeah.
That's also a pretty easy category to be like, if you were to serve the poor,
Mm-hmm.
prisoners are a pretty easy one to ascertain.
Yeah, sure.
What else would it be? Then it would be having to have conversations with folks. You know, it's hard to tell visually if somebody is having a hard time making rent. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if they are, then you know.
Right. And I think that those examples, I think, can be. I think the first couple of examples you mentioned seem probably pretty obvious to anybody listening or thinking about poverty. Like, go help the poor, and you're going to go to Skid Row, or you're going to go to the local, maybe bad part of town where homeless folks hang out, or whatever. Like, there's very obvious examples like that where our minds immediately go to. But I think less obvious could be that, family of four, or the single mom or whatever, who is struggling to make it, and they might be doing okay. Are they wealthy? No. Are they poor? They probably could definitely use help. And so then there's maybe these less thought about examples, which I think is really interesting.
Can I give
Yeah.
maybe just because there is maybe somewhere in the line, and I'm probably going to use a lot of hyperbole in this conversation to try and I hope give us a little bit of a bearing.
Okay.
So let me give an example that might help that way, because there's some things that you are harder to ascertain, and I like the widow who's having a hard time making rent. You'd have to have a conversation to know.
Right.
Yeah. But let me give a hyperbolic example on the other side. If you have a tech startup and you bought yourself a McMansion at too high of an interest rate, and your tech startup is failing because artificial intelligence is ruining your business model, and you're not savvy enough, or you can't get enough VC to make it work, or whatever, and now you have to sell your McMansion, that feels bad, but you're not poor.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Does that kind of, by way of hyperbole, help?
Yeah, I understand. I suppose, and I suppose we're speaking strictly in material terms. So at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to dollars and cents, and are you able to provide? I think it's interesting too, and we'll get into this because I want to shift to. We've kind of defined poverty a little bit. I'm curious your quick definition or understanding of wealth, and then I want to get into some of the tensions between the two. But in that example, are people poor simply because the budget doesn't work out for them? And we kind of touched on that earlier, where it's like, you make $1,000 a month, but your bills are $999, and so you can't afford to do anything else beyond that. Or, it takes $1,000 to live between groceries and gas and rent and everything, but you only make $900 or something like that. I mean, it's okay, your budget isn't quite getting there. So there is the kind of more practical sense of it. But I think I typically think of somebody who's poor as somebody who cannot have the finer things. So your example of this kind of hyperbolic situation in which you're not poor because you have a McMansion, but on paper, you probably have to maybe file for bankruptcy in that situation. And maybe there are poor people who will not have to do that. They're struggling, but they don't even have enough money to probably worry about bankruptcy or something. So it's interesting that you could put both of those people into the category of impoverished.
Yeah, and I hope that the word poverty doesn't bring both of them to mind. Because when we're talking about the poor, the way that the scriptures talk about the poor, we're not talking about the guy with the tech startup
right?
in the McMansion.
Who made the bad investment and now it's just not working out? Yeah. And I think we generally that would make sense. Okay, let's shift to wealth really quickly because I do want to spend most of our time talking about the differences and the disparities and all that. But I think it's good. We talked about poverty. What's wealth look like really quickly? Is that just the opposite of being poor? Is it that straightforward for you in your mind, or
That's an interesting one, especially when we're talking strictly in terms of materiality,
mm-hmm.
because my initial instinct is to, by way of comparison, to say it's the opposite,
Right?
you know. But I also have this instinct to I don't think wealth is bad. Now
We'll get there.
we're getting more like that's a moral term,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right, bad.
And
Right.
we haven't said that yet.
Mm-mm.
So maybe I'll back off of that. My instinct is also to maybe say that there is like a like the sort of daily bread, having what you need
Yeah.
to live is what wealth is.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
That's kind of where I would like to land. Like that's wealth.
Yeah.
And then once you go materially past wealth,
Yeah.
you're into maybe something else.
Yeah.
I don't know what the word is off the top of my head right
Mhm.
now, but for the time being, I'll probably use the words like advanced or extreme wealth or
Okay.
something.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think of scripture in certain points. So I'm in Luke right now, just in my own time, and Jesus is talking about if you're rich and someone asks for your tunic and you have two, give them one, as if having two tunics is rich, but one is maybe just necessity. Obviously, I'm assuming you'd need a tunic.
Otherwise, yeah,
In
you'd
this
be naked.
example, otherwise
Yeah.
you're naked, right? So
Or
but
unclothed, you would have
you'd have
undergarments, but yeah.
two. You have two tunics. We're not talking about 5 tunics. We're not talking about different colored tunics. You have a closet full of them. You've got two, and now you're giving one away. So it's interesting because you bring that up, and then I also think of the definition that Jesus talks, or at least he categorizes the parable in this way: the rich young ruler, where the rich young ruler is rich because of great material possessions. It says.
Yes.
So. And there I'm thinking of land. I'm thinking of
Probably.
cattle and oxen and all these
Slaves.
things and absolutely. And that's an interesting form of wealth as well. But anyways, there's this idea of like, okay, having just more than you need, the extra tunic, but also rich, being maybe the more classical example of multiple properties or possessions or.
That might be a good way even to kind of maybe think about how we're using these terms. So if having one tunic is wealth,
Right.
what you need, not having any tunics is poverty, and having two tunics
Mm-hmm.
is extreme wealth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I think for the sake of the conversation, we'll have to find a way to make sure that we're talking about that in a way that I think makes sense. Because I think and we'll get there. I think we can do that as we go. But I think that's interesting. That's helpful. Okay, so let's move into a little bit about little more of how these two interplay. So is it a problem to be, it's going to sound like a dumb question, to be poor, but my opposite of that question is going to ask you, is it the problem to be wealthy? Is it a problem to be rich? Is it a problem to amass wealth? And would you also say, is it a problem to be poor? And I feel like one seems so obvious. No, it's not okay to be poor. You don't want to be poor. But then the other one, maybe not so obvious. Is it okay to be rich? Like, should you want to be rich? And I feel like society, for sure, non-Christian society, might answer that question and say, no, of course not. Like that's a goal. Like
for sure.
So
Our social goal is accumulation of wealth.
yeah. So apply your kind of your perspective on the morality, maybe that sense of it, if you see it that way, and how those two thick concepts of rich and poor start to diverge a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going to try and answer this question using similar but different words to
Okay.
try and get at what I mean.
Okay.
And we'll start with the word that you used, moral. It seems silly to me to say that it is immoral to be poor.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it almost feels like there's no agency in being poor.
Now, there might be,
Could be.
for sure. You could be somebody who comes from a place and a family who never taught you how to use money,
Sure.
right? You don't know how to save. And then you couple that with maybe cycles of poverty, right?
Yeah.
Your mom didn't teach you how to handle the little bit of money that you do have, and you still don't have very much,
Right.
right? So there's things about cycles of poverty and maybe some agency in what you could and couldn't do
Yeah.
to be able to manage what
Yeah.
you do have. So I'm not going to say that there's no agency
Mm.
with people who are poor. That's also ridiculous. But I
Right.
don't think I would say it's immoral
Yeah.
to be poor.
Hmm.
But I would maybe say it's not good, or we shouldn't want poverty. And we certainly shouldn't want poverty for others.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Poverty is not a goal.
Right. We want to keep people out of poverty.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because we want to help the poor.
Right.
Now, places in the scripture says things like, you will have the poor with you.
Mm-hmm.
You will always have the poor with you.
Right. Yeah. Right.
That might be the Bible being cynical, looking at how the world works
Mm-hmm.
or something. Some people read that kind of scripture and say, the Bible tells us that having poor people around is good and we shouldn't even help them. That might be cynical on the part of the reader.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Okay, so that distinction. I don't think it's immoral to be poor, but it's also maybe not good to be poor,
Right.
as a goal.
Yeah. Okay.
Wealth, and I think we're talking about extreme wealth.
Sure. For the sake, let's draw the contrast.
It is probably good or not bad to have extreme wealth. You are able to provide for your needs.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is maybe, and I'm probably over the course of this conversation, the more you ask me questions, going to get pushed further and further to saying what I really mean, which is it is most likely immoral to have extreme wealth.
Okay. So let's I'm gonna poke on this one just a little bit, or push on this one a little bit, because the extreme wealth to I think me, when you hear that, and just because we're recording this, maybe the listener is going to feel like Elon Musk type wealth, right? Richest man on the face of the earth, at least close to it.
That would be the best example of extreme wealth.
That's an extreme wealth.
That's
okay,
the most extreme we have an example
but
of.
the distance between myself and what I make, and what the Lord has blessed us, my family, with, is a far cry, a penance worth of what Musk is worth. Okay, but I might also say, I will say that I feel like, okay, I'm definitely not poverty line. I'm definitely above the poverty line. I'm probably a little above the poverty line. But again, still not rich, still not extreme wealth. Help me maybe give slight more stratification of what you mean by extreme wealth, so that I can feel like I understand what you mean by that. Or do you mean to have it be that big? Like, hey, as soon as you make over, we don't have to put numbers necessarily on it, but if we said over $200,000 a year, a family of 4, which is well above what I think the United States, that's well above what the United States as a family of 4 is in terms of middle class. It's above that. But that's still not $1 million a year, and that's still not Musk's whatever billions of dollars. So just anyways, help me rein in maybe your definition slightly.
Yes, without actually making poverty lines with dollars.
Sure, because it's not always necessarily about dollars, but
I'll answer it this way, because, and like I said, this topic is experienced subjectively.
mm-hmm.
So I'll say it this way, because we are talking in terms of Christianity, the challenge of the scriptures,
Mm-hmm.
the words of Christ in the scriptures, in some cases, like the story of the rich young ruler, like other places, is to challenge us with regards to the wealth that we have. I think that is a good way to think about that stuff, instead of to hand wave it away and say, this is a lesson for somebody richer than me.
Yeah. Okay, that I think is actually a fantastic point, because I think, one, it solves this thing that I was trying to kind of pigeonhole you in, which is like, what's the number? Which of course I personally don't believe, but I'm just curious how you thought about it, because we can say the jump between the upper income middle American person who does well for themselves is probably okay, but all of a sudden when we get to Musk, we're like, oh, little billions of dollars, that seems a little too much. So, but you're
Elon Musk, if you're watching, you are immoral.
uh,
I hope you feel the fires of hell licking at your
wow,
ankles.
that's brutal. That's brutal. He will from Mars. Anyways, so I think I think, but I like the way you answered the question, because it still brings Musk in this conversation, and not judging him
And myself.
and yourself in the same conversation on the same couch, saying, hey, both of you could be considered wealthy. And even though on paper there's a big distance between the both of you, you're saying that Christ is calling us to consider ourselves, consider what to do with the wealth that we have, and that being the point, and less about it being, well, as soon as you cross the $1 million mark, you're immoral now, type of a
Mhm.
thing. Is that
Mhm.
my
That's totally right. That's totally,
okay?
totally, totally right. So, uh, like, um, I try and read the story of the rich young ruler, um, as if I'm the rich young ruler.
Okay.
Could I sell all I have,
Mm-hmm.
give it to the poor, and come and follow Jesus?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
That's
then
it.
I start, even very quickly, I start going, okay, like all I have,
Yeah. Like my record set.
yeah, the record collection, does
Record
that
collection.
does that go?
Yeah.
Am I
Yeah.
willing to follow Jesus and
Right.
have nothing else but Jesus?
Okay, I love the point. I think that this is a fork in the road in our conversation where I think for another time it would be fascinating to see how you take it there. Maybe we'll come back around to it. But staying on the material thing, because what I want to get to is understanding your ideas on how we think about wealth in America, and how that's either good or bad, how that moves us as a uh, person, a community, a government, a country, whatever, forward, backwards, in the right direction, in the wrong direction. Because you also said things like it's not good. We shouldn't want people to be poor. Okay, so how do we do that as a community? How do we do that as a society, as a country? So staying on this, you said to the camera, Musk's an immoral person. Uh, do you find that it's simply because then he's not generous enough, or he's not doing what the Lord would call him to do with his money? And we don't have to keep using him as an example. We can put any rich person in there.
We should probably use ourselves if we're being
And,
the most honest.
okay, I'm totally happy with that. So, are we immoral if we're not giving away all that we have? How do you see that practically?
At the very least, we're not following the commands of the scriptures.
Which is to sell everything that we have,
Well, that's the call to the rich young ruler.
right?
And that is an example, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, a carrot on a stick,
Mm-hmm.
like that there is something that Jesus says to a rich young ruler. And if I want to try and follow the teachings of Jesus, that's a heavy one, and
Right.
it helps me keep my perspective
Right.
about how I handle material possessions.
Okay.
And maybe even what might be required of me to get rid of in order to follow Jesus.
So then, do you see the amassing or the growing of your wealth, and since we're making this personal, as a bad thing? If tomorrow you could take a job that doubled your income, or your wife to double her income or whatever, and all of a sudden you guys are flush, you got
We're like
twice as
Scrooge
much.
McDuck swimming
You're
in the
swimming
vaults.
through coins. Do you see that as, do you reject it? Do you say, no, I'm not going to do that? Or do you try to take on this idea of like, okay, now that I have double what I make, or triple or whatever, how now shall I live?
I would be, Amy and I right now have what we need
Right.
right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? I might, if we're being honest, want more.
Mm-hmm.
I might want to stop paying my landlord and start owning my shelter.
Great example.
Owning shelter is so far above being poor.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Could be. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's so far,
If you have the ability to do so, yeah, that probably means you're in a pretty good spot.
especially right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would be conflicted
Okay.
as a base level.
Okay.
Like if we were able to double our income right now,
Right.
I would feel some conflict. I wouldn't just be like,
Let's do it.
let's go, baby.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
I would be conflicted.
hmm Would you not see it as an opportunity to, even if only your living standards raised mildly, maybe you actually get a Spotify subscription instead of using the free plan, okay, or something like that.
Yeah.
You're making modest gains, maybe here or there, an extra pair of shoes or a concert or something. Okay, but you're not doubling your lifestyle, and which is what a lot of people do. Is
Mhm.
that creeps up? Your income goes up, your lifestyle goes up. So, would you not see it though as an opportunity to, okay, how do I help more people? How do I bless this person? How do I give back to my church more? How do I do you see it that way at all in your mind when you think about that kind of situation?
Yeah, man, I'm not a saint. I would like to be. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on myself, but if I were to be as honest with you as I can be, if my material wealth doubled, if our income doubled, I would want to be able to tell you that I would keep paying rent,
uh-huh.
maintain my current level of lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
and then just give all of the surplus
Mm.
to the good to the good work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would probably start thinking about down payments
Sure.
and owning my own shelter.
Mm-hmm.
You
And
know,
it,
I would think about replacing
what's
my
the
bus.
conflict for you then? Because we're not talking about you winning the lottery and quadrupling or 100xing your income. We're in this example, we're talking, and I'm trying to get, I guess, at the point is how should we feel as maybe Christians or in general? How do you feel about people who are trying to strive and have better lives where a house is possible, or vacations once a year are possible? Like you're starting to have a little bit of that breathing room where you're spending it on not necessities, but now discretionary things. Like that's what I'm trying to kind of get at and have you take me through in your mind.
Yeah, I'm already there.
Yeah.
I go on vacations.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Yeah.
I have discretionary money.
Mm-hmm.
I am the rich young ruler.
Yeah.
You know, so this is a difficult thing for me.
Mm.
I am not speaking from a place of the poor,
Right.
you know, which is damning to me if I read
Mm.
the scriptures
Mm-hmm.
and take them seriously. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then if we start talking about doubling what I have,
Sure.
we're talking about the sixth tunic.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. In this. Yeah. Okay. All right. I see
You
how
know,
you're seeing it.
I'm in the realm of extreme wealth.
Yeah.
Not extreme wealth maybe compared to some of the people in my town,
Yeah.
but definitely with regard to what is necessary
Mm-hmm.
to be wealthy,
Mm-hmm.
regular wealthy,
Yeah.
and definitely compared to poverty.
Right.
So my baseline would be conflict.
Yeah, it would be conflict. Okay, so quickly on the just on the spiritual part, and then I want to move towards. I want to take us up a level to how we think about this more societally. If you are, well, your wife is doing all these great pottery things,
Mhm.
which I think is really cool. Business, let's say, takes off. Okay, she's doing something that she loves, and this could be you too. Like you start yourself a band and it works out, and or whatever. But you're putting yourself into a passion project, something that you love doing, and it happens to be something that other people want to enjoy also. The booch business that you guys were talking about for a while, it takes off, and now you're just making money as a result of such things. And so maybe it's not your chief aim, it's not your pursuit. You didn't do this
Mhm.
because you were lacking or you wanted to make a name for yourself.
Mhm.
But hey, like you're passionate about this thing, and it happens to also provide for your family in more material ways than you would consider yourself to need. Do you feel like that pursuit ends up, does that feel wrong? Does that feel like a conflict to you
For myself.
in that way? Yeah. Still.
Yeah. So let me use the example. Not yes, affirmative.
Mm-hmm.
Let me use the example of we were talking about selling kombucha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right now we sell to family and friends, but
Mm-hmm.
we were talking about selling it to strangers. You know,
Okay.
like as a
Yeah.
business, right?
Yeah.
And
Hold for infomercial.
link in the
Yeah.
description.
This podcast is sponsored by. Yeah.
And because of some of the conflict that
Mhm.
we're talking about, when we were talking about making it into a legitimate business, I was already looking into 1% for the planet.
Oh yeah.
I was already looking into what it would mean to donate portions to different charities
Yeah.
as a part of the business model,
Mhm.
not as an advertising campaign,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
but like as a legitimate, like, if we're going to make this stuff and end up making more money
Yeah.
than what we need,
Yeah.
it's got to be for others, not
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think you have this perspective, which I think is fascinating, and it'll color these next set of questions a lot. But I what I love is that you're kind of always trying to embody it, this ideal of balanced living within your means, and what does that look like? What does the Lord call us to? Because I think the other thing too in Scripture is we have plenty of examples of rich people who follow after the Lord. Plenty of them. Very, very wealthy. In fact, I think Saul was said to be one of the richest.
Literally a king.
Yeah, right.
You know,
David is same
another
idea.
king.
And then in Luke it talks about several women who follow around Jesus and pay for various things that he does.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, wealth is not necessarily money, material possessions is not necessarily detached from the ministry of Christ. How it involves itself, I think, is what you're getting at. But I think it's not like Jesus and all of his disciples were living in abject poverty to prove a point, or to live there or stay there as a rule. Unless you might disagree with that.
Is that a question? Or
I
are
don't
you
know.
setting up a
Actually,
question?
I didn't mean for it to be, but now I'm bringing it up. And I'm curious your thoughts on it.
So I at least want to maybe counterbalance it a bit.
Okay.
We know for sure that people funded Christ's ministry.
Right.
We also know that Christ himself was not a rich
Right.
man. You
Right.
know, so there were people who funded trips across the Sea of Galilee,
Right.
for example, right? But at least as a counterbalance, he asked fishermen to quit their jobs
Right.
and become homeless with him.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
You know,
Yeah.
and there is this thing again as a counterbalance where on one hand we could say, well, the ministers have to eat,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Paul says it, right?
you know, and
Workman's worth his wages.
of course, yes, I maybe we'll get there. I think working is good.
Yeah.
You know?
We're going there next.
But at the same time, especially when we're talking about Jesus and his disciples, people who follow the teaching, who are students of Jesus, trying to follow in his ways, there's at least in the counterbalance some aspect of trusting to multiply the loaves and the fish.
Mm-hmm.
There's something there that's
Yeah.
impractical
Yeah.
economically.
Right.
It's the Lord's economics that I at least want to have us remember.
No, you're right, and he does that, right? The practical part of Peter, I think it's Peter who says to him after Jesus, like, "Hey, lower your nets down and catch fish." And he's like, "No, we've been out here this whole time. There's nothing out here." And sure enough, they do it, and it's like 2 or 3 boats have to come in and rescue the load that they end up pulling up out of the sea. So I think you're right. There's this aspect of provision, which again, another great topic for another time. But okay, let's zoom out. I want to get back to how you see the structures here. So let's talk about work and the kind of societal role that wealth and the pursuit of wealth, the creation of wealth, actually affects a society. So if we think about work in our kind of capitalistic society that we live in, and you can note on or touch on any of this, it's the best system that we have. Maybe some would say the worst of the best, or the best of the worst, rather, system that we have to actually raise people up out of poverty. That's actually just objectively true of any system. But is the pursuit and creation of wealth in this kind of capitalistic system, would you see that as an immoral position if we kind of took out the spiritual part of it, thinking about this purely as, or answering the question, how do we have as few poor people, because we decided earlier that it's not good to be poor, we wouldn't want people to be poor. Is that a good thing to have a society, a structure, a way of living, working, interacting that creates as much wealth as possible, that brings as many people up from poverty, even if that means, and you'll definitely touch on this for me, even if that means we get an Elon Musk out of it, or we get a Bezos out of it. How do you see this societally playing out?
Such a good question, and a zillion different ways that we could
Sure.
talk about it. And I'm sure that even with each part that I try to answer, there's like a different rabbit hole that we could go down. Um, so I think that those people who can work, who have the ability to work,
Mm-hmm.
in order to provide some social good, should work.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And I'm using those words on purpose because I still don't think that just accumulating wealth is good,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are some things that people make and sell that are social neutral or social negatives.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Give me one example of each.
Pornography is a social negative.
Oh, sure.
You can make a lot of money.
Yeah, and the industry does. You're right. It's a
You
good
could
example.
make a lot of money on casinos, trapping people in their gambling habits.
Yeah.
You could make a lot of, you see what I'm saying?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Good
Those are
example.
social negatives.
Yeah.
But you're making a lot of money. And if you were to completely say that it brought those people out of poverty, the
Mhm.
casino owners, or maybe even the aspiring filmmakers
Uh-huh.
brought them out of poverty, you could say, yes, then capital accumulation is good. But what did they make? What did they sell? Who did they sell it to? What's its social impact?
Sure.
You have to look at it in those terms.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I would start to zoom out globally,
Mm.
right? Because this is I'm not a nationalist. I'm an internationalist.
Mm.
So I would like to see what does it mean to make a lot of money on something that maybe affects somebody somewhere else in the world. Maybe you start up a T-shirt business with really cool screen printed graphics on it,
Yeah.
but they're made by children in sweatshops in
Mhm.
Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
Is that good because you brought yourself up out of poverty?
Mm.
I would say no,
Mm-hmm.
because you had to impoverish somebody in order to make wealth yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
So the accumulation of wealth in and of itself, I can't just say that that is good because it can be bad.
Okay.
And it can be bad pretty quickly.
Okay. So then how do you see how do you see I'm trying to think about how to ask this question. It's actually a simple question but very difficult to phrase. What's how do you see then our ultimate how do you see the economy?
The
Like,
American
what's
economy?
well, any economy needs to produce
Yeah.
wealth to care for its citizens, or its citizens need to be able to care for themselves, and there
Yeah.
has to be some structure of bartering and back and forth and changing hands of possession or money or whatever. So how do you I see what you're saying. I get where your point is. How does that structure your view of America? Because I guess that's where we live. But
Yeah. Well, I'm a
take
critic
that.
of capitalism
Yeah.
because it has impoverished so many
Mm-hmm.
and has created so much stuff, and I actually mean stuff,
Yeah.
and waste
Mm-hmm.
and social negatives
Mm-hmm.
that I'm a critic.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, and I'm sure that there's maybe even yourself, maybe others who would not like to hear that I'm a critic of capitalism, but I like things to get better,
Mm-hmm.
which is what criticism is for.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see something better than capitalism
Mm-hmm.
as it currently exists.
Yeah.
Can we at least agree that things could get better than they are right now?
Well, just answering that specific question, yes.
I think most people who are adults who work
Yeah.
would agree. Things could get better.
Yeah. Things absolutely could get better. I think it's a
How do we do it?
it's a false question. No, that is a question. That is a question. How do we do it? And I think that if you think about the question that you asked, which is can things get better? That feels to me like a meta question, like a very like metaphysical type of question. Can things get better? Yes. I think some people would say no, but I think a lot of people, if you're looking societally, things get better. It's hard to own a home. You're not a millennial right now owning a home without help from somebody, because it's just too darn hard to do that. So things could get better. Do we like the wealth disparity? No, I don't. I think things could get better. We could go on. There are lots of things that could
Sure.
get better. And I think you're right. It is about the how. How do we create a better situation for the most amount of people? Do you see, when you say you're a critic of capitalism, is it because you don't think it produces outcomes that lead to, I'll just say better, whatever you think better is? And maybe you could also define better when you say when things can get better. Is it
could-
just interest rates? Is
I could
it
try.
just,
I
you
could
know what
try.
I mean?
We're starting to talk about really, really, really big things, and like I'm not an economist and stuff, but
Right.
I'm gonna try based on what I feel like I know.
Okay.
And maybe I'll try and use my experience a little bit to
Or,
answer.
or hang on that point of why you're a critic of capitalism. Maybe that'll also help illuminate.
Okay, I'm a critic of capitalism because I don't think criticism is a negative thing.
Sure.
Okay, because if we don't criticize things, they can't improve.
Okay.
And I'm not a pessimist, so I want things to improve.
Okay.
I'm a critic of capitalism as it stands because we've had a few hundred years now of seeing how it works, and there have been enough social ills and negative outcomes as a result of it that I don't feel that the wealth that it's created,
Mhm.
especially extreme wealth
Mm-hmm.
for some people at the expense of others.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you started this line of questioning asking me not to talk about it with its moral quality, but I have moral problems with how that wealth has been created
Yeah.
over its few hundred-year existence.
Yeah. Oh, and to clarify, I think you can't divorce. I think at some level you can't divorce morality from wealth creation.
It's hard for me.
I think. Well, I think in general. I mean, because inherently wealth creation requires the exchange of money. In this case, let's just say, but it could be anything. But in this case, let's say it's money. It requires me, who has the money, to give you, the person selling the product or the thing that I want. It requires that exchange of goods, and so I'm going to be giving up something inherently to get something, and you likewise are losing something to gain something. And I think you're pointing out the very honest fact that sometimes those some things that are being exchanged are not good. Those
Yeah.
are moral negatives.
Yeah.
It's not a lemonade stand every time, and here's my $1 for a nice cold glass of lemonade. It's,
yes.
you know.
And then sometimes, I mean, I don't want to get too far on a weird rabbit trail, but like a lot of times when I start talking about capitalism with people who are not critics of it, I start hearing lemonade stands or trading seashells for burgers. Like you start talking in these terms,
Sure.
but like we live in a multinational conglomerate,
Yeah.
style of capitalism where money flows over borders
Yeah.
and money is created in stock markets,
Yeah.
and money is created by betting on other people losing
Mm-hmm.
and stuff.
Yeah.
And like we're talking about stuff that's so far removed from just like squeezing lemons and selling it for dollars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like it's so much more complex and complicated than what a lot of proponents of capitalism like to idealize when talking about it.
For sure. Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense
It
without
does.
having to maybe get into the weeds of what all of those
No,
things
no,
are?
I think, and we don't have time to do all of that, because I think that, yeah, there's books, many leather-bound books about such topics that we won't get through today. But I think what I like hearing your critiques of it, because I'm definitely a proponent of capitalism. I do think it's the best of the worst structures of economic governance. And I think that is the case because of things I've read, history, how I've seen it work. But I think that your critiques are fair, and I think if anything, it gives me, and this is part of the reason I loved having this conversation. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about it is because it gives me pause to say, okay, I might be gung ho on capitalism, which generally, again, I am. But it gives me pause to think to myself, okay, well, there are structures. Capitalism is is happening just as well at the lemonade stand that it is also happening on Pornhub. And one is clearly a moral evil, and one is innocuous, or maybe even a positive.
Yeah, lemonade is good.
Yeah, lemonade is good. So I think, and I think it's a good thing for us to say to ourselves, okay, both of those things are positive, or views of capitalism that are legitimate just strictly speaking. Somebody wants something, you're selling a good, that good is worth something, and money is being changed hands willingly.
Can I say one thing that um, the difference in when I'm saying capitalism, I don't just mean the exchange of goods and services because that's just economy, not capitalist economy.
Okay.
Capitalist economy is the accumulation of capital.
Okay.
That's the difference, right? Because if you were to live in a socialist economy, or let's just use that as the one counterexample, you're still exchanging goods and services, just not in a accumulation of capital type way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, except for I think that the key defining feature of capitalism is the fact that the rate at which you accumulate that capital is not set by a person who's removed from the exchange. So in a capitalistic society, I'm saying, hey, I've got lemonade for you. It's $1, and you're going to say to me, hey, I don't think it's worth $1. I think it's worth 75 cents, and you either buy it or you don't buy it. And then I adjust my prices based on whether you buy my lemonade or 1,000 people buy my lemonade or not at that price. Versus in a socialistic society, that is being set above me. I don't get to sell my lemonade for what it's worth. I get to sell it for what I'm told I'm allowed to sell it for. And so I think, and that's to control a whole host of things in the supply chain to make it fair and economical for everybody. So I think I would say the price control piece of it is crucial in understanding what I think defines whether or not capitalism works or socialism works. And there's a lot more inside of all of that. But I just want to make sure I add in that point, because I do think that's the thing. Because I do think when I say the word willingly, I want to sell you my lemonade. You want to buy it, and then we find a price that works or that we agree on, or I go out of business. I mean, that's what makes capital fantastic, is that the cream will always rise to the top, because it's your product is either worth buying, participating in the service, buying, participating in, or it's not. And then you either go away or you make a lot of money.
Ideally, sure.
Ideally,
yeah.
And I think you're hitting on a lot of good points, which is that it's a very idealistic, and you would kind of hope it always works out that way. But I think in some simple cases like restaurants or products and services that are fairly mundane and don't have connections to government or, international interest, it's probably more idealistic or closer to the ideal than
the thing that you just laid out is kind of the ideal of capitalistic exchange. The only thing I wanted to say was that I just wanted to say that the exchange of goods and services is not exclusive to capitalism.
Yeah. Oh no, and I would totally agree. I mean, that you're absolutely right. I think maybe short of totalitarianism or some kind of government like that where things are taken forcibly from you, I think you're totally right. So touch on the international thing really quickly, because I think that's interesting.
Okay.
You mentioned capitalism affecting other people.
Yeah.
Or the structure of capitalism not just being my lemonade stand in the exchange for your dollar, but because I had to source the cup or the lemons or whatever, the sugar, and this cup was made by a child internationally in another country that might not be run on a capitalistic society, right? In this example, we buy a lot of stuff from China. China's not capitalist; it's communist,
state
run. Yeah, and so how do you see it that way? And is it really our fault? Should capitalism be responsible for such things when, if China was just capitalistic also, then it would probably work out better. Like, how do you see it, the responsibility falling on capitalism? Is it because we take advantage of those structures, and maybe everything, if it was American made, you'd be more okay with it, as an example?
Well, I am at the very least a bigger proponent of American-made goods because there are labor protections in America.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
On the law books,
right?
Whether or not that there's still idealism in there, but at least we have some,
Sure.
right? So American-made goods I prefer over international slave labor.
Yeah. Oh,
like if we were to make those comparisons,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I'd rather have my neighbor make something and make it under good quality working conditions and make their money off of it, as opposed to a slave somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I'm using the word slave.
You are
to really punctuate and not use euphemism when we're talking about like children mining diamonds in Africa.
Sure.
that's a slave.
That's bad.
When we're talking about children sewing together like the t-shirts that go to H&M and then get, you know what I'm saying? That's a slave.
Yeah.
Even if they get paid a pittance, like we're talking about slavery.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We'll leave that. I'm going to leave that for another time. Because I would definitely agree, but I think there's contrast. I do think that capitalism actually ends up helping some cases in these third worlds, because without it, they don't have business. There is not the kind of economy that they would have otherwise. And I think it's so morally fraught that I don't want to get into it with the time that we have left. Okay, so thinking about this idea, the critiques of capitalism, which I appreciate. How do you see a better structure? I want you to specifically talk about something that I know you and I've mentioned privately or just not on camera about, which is this idea of maybe more of a co-op type of model of where the worker owns the means of production.
Yeah.
Type of model that maybe you think works better, and maybe I think you've mentioned this too, aligns maybe more with the ministry of Jesus in that sense, where it feels a little bit more socialist or even communist in some way. So
yeah, and these are all big words, and maybe for some of us, scary words. But I love that you brought up co-ops. Co-ops can exist inside of, not only can, they do exist inside of capitalist economies. And they give more to the workers than your standard capitalist business structure. And all of them are different, just the way that all businesses are different. But just by way of a haphazard example, if you work at Amazon, Jeff Bezos owns Amazon, and you put the tape on the boxes, right? To make Jeff more money. And Jeff might give you more money for putting the tape on good, or he might let you tell more tape putters how to put the tape. You could become a middle manager or something.
Of tape.
But you never become Jeff.
Right.
And if you put on twice as much tape, you're not building personal wealth. You're building Jeff's wealth and hoping that he gives you
a promotion.
In a co-op, and they're all a little bit different, but the basic idea is that you and the rest of the workers agree to own the business together.
Yeah.
And so now it becomes more difficult. Jeff can make decisions by himself.
Right.
Maybe he's beholden to his shareholders or whatever.
Sure.
But he
more or less
makes the decision.
Yeah.
In a co-op, you all make the decisions. You know?
Okay. All 20 of the employees or whatever.
Sure.
Okay.
So it might move slower.
Yeah.
It might be more difficult.
Right.
But if you all put the tape on twice as fast, you are all building your wealth together.
Yeah.
All of the workers own the means of production.
Right.
In that example.
Yeah.
Right? In the Jeff example, he owns the tape. He owns the factory.
Box,
he owns everything. In the co-op example, you all own it together.
Yeah.
And there are examples of this working in America.
And you share in the revenue then.
There's different structures for how it works, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you share equally.
Right.
There's even, ways that can be different amounts that you make or whatever,
right.
But you all own it.
Right. And I would imagine that means that the company, as it becomes more profitable, you are also more profitable.
Yes.
To the degree that you are invested or you share within the structure.
Yep.
Yeah. So instead of Jeff making 95 cents of every dollar and you making 5, maybe it's 80% or 80 cents.
At the very least,
something like that.
You have a say in how much you make.
I think that is an interesting, maybe a slightly more interesting or convincing point for me, because again, I'll put this as a question. Everybody owns the means of production in a co-op. How did the business come to be started as a co-op, and who stands to lose the money that it took to invest in that business in a co-op?
All of you.
Okay. So then are you also in debt as a member of the tape squad who's putting tape on the boxes?
Maybe.
Yeah, because that was always the thing I felt was most convincing. You own a pencil factory, and we're talking about boxes. You own a box factory, and you're putting together boxes, and so there's cardboard, and there's the material to make the cardboard, there's the tape and the material to make the tape, and then maybe the machines or whatever, and the people. Okay. And without you, the tape putter honor, I cannot get my boxes taped up, and therefore cannot ship anything out, or cannot hold. They cannot be used to hold things, move things, whatever.
It's a bad box.
It's a bad box. But if I lose you, I can find somebody else to put the tape on the box who's willing to work for whatever the wage I'm willing to pay for it. If I no longer exist, if as the owner of the box company, then none of the jobs exist, because the one who owns the machine, who has the debt for the building, the debt for the material, all the rest of it,
It gets sold to somebody
It's
else,
all
or
gone.
it gets
liquidated
completely
or whatever.
liquidated. Yep.
So then how do you see the disparity in a co-op in this shared model, where perhaps there doesn't seem to be, it sounds great to share in the revenue, but it doesn't seem to be that you're sharing in the downside or the risk. I'll say the word risk.
Because you all share the risk more,
Mm-hmm.
then the burden of risk becomes easier for each individual, and
Because
then
it's diversified, the risk.
because it's held between many people,
Right.
you know.
Hmm.
So the risk gets lower,
Right.
and the upside gets better,
Yeah.
in theory.
Yeah. In theory. Yeah.
Your business can still fail, right?
Right.
You can have a co-op that makes something that sucks,
Yeah.
and then you just all fail,
Right.
right? You still have to make something good,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying?
No, that definitely makes sense. Yeah. No, it does. And I think that's
And I guess, to get to the moral thing just really briefly, you
Yeah.
could have a co-op that makes things that are social ills. You could have a co-op of pornographers.
oh, for sure.
And I would think that's not good.
Yeah. Right. It's not inherently that a co-op is the right way to go, but
Morally altruistic.
But the idea is that you like the structure of it as it pertains to all of the workers who are involved. That it's not just one person amassing most of the wealth.
Yes, or a group of shareholders who don't do any work,
Yeah.
who don't even work at the company. They
Right.
just own parts of the company.
They invest in parts of the company.
Mhm.
Shareholders don't get to be shareholders without investment. But I hear what you're saying. I think that's all fascinating. The critiques, because you think it's good to be critical, and I like that perspective. I do think that's true. We have plenty of critiques of capitalism. How do you see the positive sides? Like, give me your perspective on what you like, maybe about.
Say something nice about
Yeah,
capitalism.
say something nice about
You putting this
capitalism.
on the internet?
Its feelings are hurt, and
Say something nice about capitalism. It actually is hard for me because I am such a critic, but what became the middle class last century seemed to be a good standard of living.
last century. So you're thinking 90s. Like, what do you have, a decade?
There were some good times.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
There were some good times. There were some bad times because capitalism tends to break every so often.
Mm-hmm.
The 90s were a good time to be a middle class American.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that it was all begotten
Mm-hmm.
in a morally good way, but I think that the emergence of the middle class at least showed Americans and other people that there's a standard of living above poverty that's attainable and good. I like the middle class, working class level of lifestyle.
Would you find then that maybe your issue with capitalism is more about its wealth disparity, its ability to create vast wealth disparity? If capitalism was producing a fairly evenly stratified set of people, group of people, and another thing we didn't get to, but you can comment on it. There's always going to be poor people. There's always going to be rich people, and there's always going to be people in the middle. That's just how it will be. And you'll disagree with that, but that seems logical to me, that there's always going to be people at the bottom, middle, and the top in any structure. But my point just being, or my question being to you, do you think it's the issue of the gap in income disparity or wealth disparity that bothers you so about it? And that maybe you'd be more of a proponent of capitalism if it produced a slightly more even, maybe not slightly, but more even structure?
Capitalism would have to remake itself in order to achieve what you're describing, I think.
Okay.
Especially when we're talking about like international capital, right?
Sure.
Because so many of our corporations rely on poverty that is so much lower than some of the poverty even in America, the 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 disparity is unthinkable
Mm-hmm.
to me. It's unthinkable.
Yeah.
So it would have to remake itself into something far more like socialism, in my
Yeah.
mind, to be able to shrink that gap.
Socialism, in your mind, doesn't take advantage of cheap labor in third world countries?
Socialism is, in its definition, the workers owning the means of production. So if you were in a co-op, that would be a socialistic
Sure.
business model.
That doesn't mean that you don't get your cups or tape from China.
Sure, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Hopefully, right, if we're talking about idealism, if you're the kind of people who are forming co-ops because you can see some of the issues with capitalist structures of business, you might also see some issues with capital structures of trade, and
Sure.
try and source your stuff nicely.
Not from there. Yeah.
Not use slave labor.
Right. But
ideally,
remove the international component here. So you support all forms of capitalism that are not reliant on international or third world country, slave labor. It seems to be a big point for you.
It's a huge point,
right? And I'll leave that one. I would agree.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, I think there's reason. I have points on that, but just thinking about capitalism and for American made for Chevys, which is not totally true. I understand, but it's made in America or whatever.
Yeah.
How do you see it that way? Do you still have a problem with it if it's? I know you said earlier you said less of a problem, but I guess I'm trying to get at what's the real thing that bugs you about it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like sloganeer here or whatever, but capitalism as a system is it at least has borne out, it seems, to require the exploitation of the poor in order to amass wealth upwards.
Okay.
It so far has required it.
Yeah.
In every way that I can see it. Now, you could maybe that's looking at it at kind of a macro level. You could maybe zoom in on the guy who grows his own trees and then cuts them and carves them into bears and sells them to tourists or something. And he's accumulating his wealth or whatever. And maybe that's capitalism and that's not bad. But I'm talking, if we're talking about the ism and national scale, no.
Yeah. Why is it wrong for someone to engage in the willful employment or to willfully, I'm trying to think about a smarter way to say this, but I'm not coming with it. Why is it wrong for someone to say, you know what, I need a job, I'm 17, I don't have a job, and I'm going to go and work somewhere. I don't have a lot of experience. Oh, I can flip burgers though for $17 an hour or whatever. How is that exploitative? Because that is an aspect of capitalism. McDonald's will not pay you $100 an hour. They're going to pay you just what they have to, so that they can keep their costs as low as possible and their profits as high as possible.
Yes. I think that bit is actually important.
Yeah, and I know. So, but it's also willful employment. That's the word I was trying to use, willful.
Yeah.
Because that 17-year-old doesn't have to take it.
They don't have to, right? Because we're assuming that their mom owns the apartment or rents the apartment, and
single mom doesn't have to take that job.
Doesn't have to until a certain point when you start talking about having to eat.
Totally. Okay. Okay, totally. So I think
At some point you're talking about like there is at a certain point of pressure where you need to work
right.
if you're able.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that's the uncomfortable part of it, which is okay. So, and this is maybe where we can bring it back more macro a little bit because I think this is fascinating. In that I think the 17-year-old, I personally don't think they deserve to make anything close to middle income. They need to work slave labor type jobs so they can learn and gain experience. I'm being facetious a little bit.
Yeah.
But
I hope mostly facetious.
Oh yeah, I guess I just mean like labor and toil, my young
Learn how to
friend.
labor.
Learn how to work. And
Work is good.
and if you start off making $100,000 a year when you're 17, you're not going to get it. You're not going to, I think, personally understand what it means to do. But that's not totally fair and not true all the time. Again, being a little facetious here.
Yeah.
I think what I struggle is when I do see the mom who's recently divorced, the dad ditches the family. She's got 2 kids now, and she's trying to do it on her own. But she's been a stay-at-home mom for the last 10 years, and husband up, whatever. I imagine this terrible situation, and
Sure.
she doesn't have the work experience and the job at Chevron or the job at McDonald's or whatever. She's making minimum wage, and that does feel really difficult.
Yeah,
to me.
because at a certain point, if it was just her, let's say she wasn't just a mom, if it was just her, she has to eat.
Mhm.
If she has children, she has a responsibility, even like a legal responsibility,
Sure.
to feed her children. If not, they get taken away from her.
Right.
So like at a certain point, you have to take a job.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So then is your concern that the wage is too low then? Because what if that wage at McDonald's was now $100 an hour? She's making well more than she needs to for that burger flipping job, and she's doing just fine.
Yeah. I think that workers
Mm-hmm.
should at least have a say in their own wages.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the decision to work with that person or not is not that say?
I don't think so.
Mm.
As soon as you take that job, you lose your vote.
Your only power is whether you stay or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have well, you can negotiate, but not usually for those jobs. It's either
Sure, and you could negotiate, but you don't have a say.
Yeah.
You have a plea.
Yeah. That's right.
And there's a difference, right?
No. Oh, I definitely agree. Yeah.
So, in a co-op structure, or in some situation where the workers own the means of production or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you have a say. You at least have more of a say.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you can sit at the board meeting, you
Mhm.
know, and some of these places have levels of boards and whatever,
Sure.
right? But you have more democratic control over your own wages.
Mm.
And best case scenario, in my mind, is that the workers are able to make the wages equal to the value they produce.
That sounds capitalistic to me.
Equal to the value they produce.
Sure.
So if I flip
Equal-
a burger
Uh-huh.
and you own the burger joint,
Uh-huh.
and you sell the burger at your burger joint to a third person for $10,
Uh-huh.
how many dollars are you, the owner, going to give me, the person who made the burger?
Whatever it's worth.
How much value did I create in making that burger?
This is I agree. This is going to get you to capitalism. How much value did you create? Well, that's dependent. What's that dependent on? How much I able to make from that burger? That's the first thing. If I'm only able to make $1, I cannot pay you $2. Okay? So if I'm able to make $10 for the burger, and this is where I'll meet you in the middle here, is if I'm able to make $10 for that burger and the cost of that burger is 5 cents, I have a lot of play in my margin. Yeah, we're not talking about the rest of the things, the patty, and
Right.
cheese
Sure.
and
Sure.
whatever.
Sure.
But the if I come to you and I say, hey, I just made a $9 profit off this, or $10, I made $10 on this. I'm only going to give you $1. Then you might feel gypped. So you have to decide if that's worth it or not. If you say, wow, $1, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad for it. Or do you say, no, that's ridiculous. I'm not getting paid $1 for all of the work that I felt like I did.
And in a capitalist business structure,
Yeah.
I have no say.
You don't. But what you can do is you can quit that job and you can go down the street to the sandwich making shop that pays $3 for every $10 sandwich they make. And you'll do that. And then I'm left not being able to sell my $10 burger at all. I make $0. and I still have to pay for the fryer, the meat, the thing, because that's debt. I can't get rid of that. So I'm losing money. And so for me as the business owner, I take on all the risk. And if I pay you $1 and you quit, then I can't sell any burgers now. So
Yeah, I agree. Paying people better keeps them around. I agree.
yeah,
In a capitalist system,
uh-huh,
paying the workers better is better. And I'm just saying that even better than that
uh-huh,
is the workers themselves, along with
uh-huh.
maybe the ownership, right?
Yeah,
Because maybe in a co-op system there is people who are more like ownership, and then there's people
yeah,
who function at a second tier
yeah,
of cooperative
sure,
ownership. You have a say
yeah,
as opposed to just hopping around with different pleas or whatever,
sure.
and then businesses closing as a result. These are
Mm,
cooperative businesses as opposed to competitive businesses, not just competition between businesses, but also
mhm.
non-competition between workers,
Yeah,
cooperation.
yeah, I can see that. It's unfortunate that we have to pause the conversation here because we do have to wrap up. But I think there's an interesting place that we get to in this conversation where I think both of us I like starting with the spiritual side of the things that we did, or at least understanding kind of where we're both coming from, because when we get to the end of this conversation where we're at now, we're starting to find the gap, the daylight between kind of how we see the best way to improve, I think, the quality of people's lives, because that's, I think, ultimately what I'm thinking about. And I think you can tell me if I'm wrong, but ultimately what you're thinking about in that sense, which is how do we create the most value for the most amount of people, not have poor people, like you said earlier on. I want to give you the last word, though. I'm curious how this view for you of wealth and poverty and rich and poor, how do you feel like this has affected your walk? How do you see yourself moving through life? You mentioned a lot of things that you do in your kind of day to day, like how you would think about if your income doubled tomorrow, or if you started a business and how you'd think about that. How do you care for people like Christ calls us to do that, but living in a society that is generally capitalistic and has the focus on wealth and think of just close us out with your thoughts on how you kind of see this and its impact for you and
Yeah, I try and keep the call to help the poor
hmm
very, very, very close.
hmm
You know, um, maybe even to my own detriment, my
hmm
own economic
oh
detriment,
sure
um, because I want to, at least, at the very least, in lip service, and then even further, in my heart and in my actions,
yeah
I want to trust the Lord to take care of me
yeah
for what I need,
yeah
which is what I earlier defined as wealth,
yeah
having what I need.
yeah
I want the Lord to provide my wealth, and uh, because there's so many places in Scripture that call us toward the poor.
yeah
And even in some places, Jesus calls us toward the poor uh, in order to minister to him directly.
yeah
And I'm looking for Jesus. So I'm gonna keep giving too much money to the homeless guy. I'm gonna keep uh, serving at our local homeless shelter. I'm gonna keep visiting people in prison.
yeah
I'm gonna probably keep, at the very least, feeling bad about my sixth tunic. Um, these sorts of things.
yeah
I keep the ministry to the poor at the forefront of my mind,
yeah
and I don't want to be like the rich young ruler who goes away sad.
yeah
I would rather be like the kind of person who could say, "Yes, I would give it up to follow
Mm.
Jesus."
I love. We're gonna leave it there. I love that, but I think the last thing I'd say is what I love so much about that. I think is that there's almost freedom in, I don't want to say poverty, but in having a dependency not on wealth or on money or physical things, but on Christ. And I super love that perspective. I think that we can all, doesn't matter how much money you're making, think about our wealth, whatever it is, in that way. And I think we're probably living out closer to what Christ calls us to than anything else with that perspective.
I hope so.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.